You said earlier in this hearing you were concerned about a hostile foreign power affecting our election. Do you recall the Intelligence Community Inspector General, Chuck McCulloch, having an investigation into an anomaly found on Hillary Clinton's emails?
I do not.
Well, let me refresh your recollection. The Intelligence Community Inspector General, Chuck McCulloch, sent his investigator, Frank Rucker, along with an IG attorney, Jeanette McMillan, to brief you and Dean Chappelle and two other FBI personnel that I won't name at this time about an anomaly they had found on Hillary Clinton's emails that were going to and from the private unauthorized server that you were supposed to be investigating. Now, do you remember it?
I remember meeting Mr. Rucker on either one or two occasions. I do not remember the specific content or discussions.
Well, I'll help you with that too then. Mr. Rucker reported to those of you, the four of you there, in the presence of the IG attorney, that they had found this anomaly on Hillary Clinton's emails going through her private server. And when they had done the forensic analysis, they found that her emails, every single one except for four, over 30,000 of them, were going to an address that was not on the distribution list. It was a compartmentalized bit of information that was sending it to an unauthorized source. Do you recall that?
Sir, I don't.
Well, he went on to explain it, and you didn't say anything. No. You thanked him, you shook his hand, but the problem was that it was going to an unauthorized source that was a foreign entity unrelated to Russia, and from what you've said here, you did nothing more than nod and shake the man's hand when you didn't seem to be all that concerned about our national integrity of our election when it was involving Hillary Clinton. So the forensic examination was done by the ICIG, and they can document that. But you were given that information and you did nothing with it. And one of the things I found most egregious with Mr. Horowitz's testimony, and by the way, Horowitz got a call 4 times by someone wanting to brief him, leaving messages telling him about this, and he never returned the call. He had 500 pages of bias that he gave us. And then he threw a bone to the Democrats and said, but we can't find bias. And let me tell you, when you have text messages, Mr. Strzok, the way you do, saying the things you did, you'd been better off coming in here and say, look, that was my bias. And you kind of get around to that a little bit when you say, hey, everybody's got political views. Those are called biases, and we all have them. And you have come in here and said, I had no bias. And you do it with a straight face. And I watched you in the private testimony you gave. And I told some of the other guys, he is really good. He's lying. He knows, we know he's lying. And he could probably pass a polygraph.
Point.
It's amazing.
Mr. Chairman.
No, this is my
Mr.
time.
Chairman, I'm sorry.
It needs to
point
be
of order.
paused.
This point of order.
No.
The gentleman will state his point of order.
A member of this committee just asserted that this witness, who is under oath and a former agent of the FBI, lied. There is no evidence of that. I ask him to withdraw it.
I do not withdraw it. He is not a member of Congress. It's not a violation of the rule. And just as you have been expressing bias through your members about what a hero
there is not a
gentleman
single person on this committee who has ever characterized a witness
Gentleman
as
from
lying.
Rhode Island.
Gentleman,
it's my time.
That's a disgrace.
Gentleman from Rhode Island will
Praise
suspend.
him. No, the disgrace
Mr.
is what this man has done.
The gentleman from Texas will suspend for a moment.
There is the disgrace. And it won't be recaptured anytime soon because of the damage you've done to the justice system. And I've talked to FBI agents around the country. You've embarrassed them. You've embarrassed yourself. And I can't help but wonder when I see you looking there with a little smirk, how many times did you look so innocent into your wife's eye and lie to her about Lisa?
Mr. Chairman, this is outrageous.
Credibility of a witness
Shame
is
on
always
you,
an
Mr.
issue.
Mr.
you
Chairman, please, there's
Have you
Mr. Chairman, this is intolerable harassment of the
What is
witness.
wrong with that? You need your medication.
The gentleman controls the time.
Well, I ask that the witness be permitted to respond
Well,
to
He
let
will
me
be
ask you-
permitted.
despicable search.
He will be
Did
permitted to
you ever
respond. The
talk
gentleman
to
controls
Hillary
the time.
Clinton during your investigation, besides the one questioning you mentioned, before that or after that to this day?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman will state his point of order.
It is, I think, against the rules of the House for a member of the committee to be impugning the character of a witness.
It is not.
He should ask questions to elicit. The purpose of this hearing is to elicit information. He should ask questions to elicit information. He should not be impugning the character of the witness.
The gentleman is advised the rules of the House only are directed to members of the House and the President of the United States.
Therefore, in other words, it is okay to impugn the character of witnesses in any way whatsoever?
Well, listen, I've heard many members on your side of the aisle impugn character of somebody who is covered by the rules of the House. But the gentleman, the gentleman has 20 seconds left. The clock will be turned back on, and he can complete his time, and then the witness can respond.
So if you talk to Hillary Clinton, other than the time she was examined in front of the witnesses.
No.
So after throwing away what you have with all the bias you have, you've never even gotten a thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman may respond.
Sir, well, that's quite a set of statements. and
Mr.
I'm not quite
Chairman,
sure
I
where
did
to
not
respond.
finish with a question.
The gentleman,
There was no question asked.
Mr.
There
Chairman,
was
he's
no
been given the
answer
opportunity
neither.
to respond.
the gentleman will suspend. The time of the gentleman has expired, and as I've indicated
The rules
earlier,
of our hearings are if there is a question asked during the time, the witness to respond to the question
witness
after
is-
the time.
the witness is going to be allowed to respond briefly.
That's a new rule.
Sir, first, I assure
No
you,
question.
under oath, as I spoke also during my interview a week or two ago, I have always told the truth. The fact that you would accuse me otherwise, the fact that you would question whether or not that was the sort of look I would engage with in a family member who I have acknowledged hurting, goes more to a discussion about your character and what you stand for and what is going inside you.
It's
and the
to
integrity
your
of man.
credibility,
And
and
while-
you lost your credibility.
Both
And
individuals.
while I
You've
doubt it-
lost your credibility.
While
That's
I doubt
the
it
problem.
plays well
Gentleman
to
from
America,
Texas will,
I'm not sure
will
it plays
the
well.
gentleman from Texas will suspend. The witness has had ample opportunity to express his feelings about that, and now the chair recognizes the
Mr.
gentleman
Chairman,
before
there's
him.
a
Deutsch.
discussion about the representative's first assertion about what the ICIG said that I would like to respond to.
Very briefly.
Very briefly, I have no recollection of that conversation. I can tell you I am not a computer forensic expert. I can tell you that every allegation that we had, and ICIG was a great and close partner, every allegation that we had, whether from them or anybody else, was forwarded to experts who looked at it. The scores and scores of servers and BlackBerries and emails and everything we got were combed over carefully by the FBI's experts to see if there's any indicia of intrusion.
But you don't recall
The things
going
you're saying,
over
sir,
those emails,
a lot-
correct?
Much of what
Gentlemen
you're
will
saying, I
suspend.
have no idea what you're talking about, and frankly,
And the
suspect
witness
is
will
wrong.
suspend as
I
well.
do not know what you're talking about.
That
you
is
just
enough.
can't let a witness
The-
go on forever.
the-
when the fact is, you never did anything
Chairman,
about those.
order.
Correct?
Regular order.
You didn't do anything about it.
Sir, if there was a lead, give it to the team. Unequivocally.
The gentleman-
there was nothing along
Mr.
the lines
Strzok,
that
you will
was not addressed.
suspend.
Well, that'll come out.
Mr.
enough.
Gohmert, you will suspend. Mr. Deutsch, I apologize.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me observe that
there have been all kinds of complaints about leaking transcripts and things like that. One of the reasons we are here today is because there has been a flood of leaks out of the Justice Department about what is going on. It's barely a day goes by when you can't pick up the newspaper and find out that it's rumored this and rumored that. And then we have a witness from the FBI that comes up here and says, oh, no, we can't talk about that here to the Congress, which has constitutional oversight responsibility because it's against our rules. Well, I hope there'd be a few prosecutions of people out of justice that have been leaking this stuff to the various news media. Now, I want to get to looking at statutes. You look at rules, I've been looking at statutes. And somehow along the line, in the report on the conclusions of the Clinton investigation, the word gross negligence was changed to extremely careless in determining Mrs. Clinton's handling of classified information. Now, gross negligence would mean that it would subject her to criminal liability. Extremely careless would have the opposite effect. It would not. So I'd like to ask you, Mr. Strzok, a couple questions about that. In the original May 2nd draft of the statement that Director Comey was making, he characterized Mrs. Clinton's actions as grossly negligent. Is that correct?
That's my recollection, yes.
Yes. And are you aware that gross negligence was changed to extremely careless in the eventual statement?
Yes.
Okay. Now, do you recall at the June 6, 2016 meeting attended by you and Mr. Ribicki, Ms. Moyer, Mr. Maffa, and Lisa Page to discuss the language of the statute on whether to use grossly negligent or something else in the draft statement? What was discussed at that meeting?
So, sir, I don't remember that specific meeting. There are a variety of meetings with a bunch of people that included discussion of this concern.
Okay. Did the alternative phrase extremely careless come up at the meeting?
It did at some point, sir. I don't know if it was during that meeting or at another one. I don't remember that.
Whenever it happened, who brought it up?
My recollection, sir, is that somebody within our Office of General Counsel did. It was one of the attorneys. I don't remember which one.
You don't remember who did?
No, it was a legal issue that one of the attorneys brought up.
Okay. Now, immediately after that meeting, metadata shows that you modified the draft statement on June 6th. Is this when the phrase grossly negligent was changed to extremely careless?
Sir, again, I don't recall specifically when it happened. I am aware as well of that metadata. My recollection is of working on the draft with a group of us in my office, because it was the largest office, and taking the inputs of probably 5 different people. Was
it your computer that put the change into the statement?
Based on my subsequent review of that metadata, I believe that to be true.
Okay, and who has access to your computer? Anybody beside you?
No, I do. My secretary had access to elements of it, but.
And why was the change made? You were in the meeting where it was agreed that the change would be made. Why was that?
My recollection, sir, again, was, and I'm not an attorney, my recollection was that attorneys within the FBI had raised the concern that the use of gross negligence triggered a very specific legal meaning. In a legal context.
Yeah, criminal.
In a legal,
criminal.
That's exactly right. In a legal context, grossly negligent is used in various statutes to, particularly one of the mishandling statutes in 793, to talk about a criminal element of the criminal offense.
Okay.
And so, sir, if I may quickly, and I promise I'll this
change was Hillary's get-out-of-jail-free card, right?
Absolutely not, sir.
Well,
not in any way.
Hillary hasn't been prosecuted, so if she wasn't grossly negligent but was extremely careless, then there's no criminal standard involved. With grossly negligent, there is.
Sir, I think there are a lot of things I would disagree with in that assertion. First is she received no get-out-of-jail-free card. We pursued the facts.
She did get a get-out-of-the-White House free card when the voters cast their votes.
Sir, I've heard that said a lot, and I can tell you there's nothing further from the truth.
Oh.
There was an effort
Trump won. That's the truth.
So, sir, what I would tell you with regard to that decision, there was concern within the perspective of a legal definition of that term that people would draw an inference based on that use that it was necessarily talking about a particular subset of a statute. My understanding
My
is what
time is just about up. That rates 4 Pinocchios. I yield back.
Sir, Mr. Chairman, may I respond?
The gentleman may respond.
Sir, what I would tell you with regard to that decision is that there was concern about the use of the word grossly negligent and the question of whether or not Director Comey wanted to convey that in the sense of applying the elements of a crime, and that whether or not his use, when people heard that, particularly when lawyers looked at it, whether or not they would interpret that as his saying that she did or did not commit any particular statute. My recollection is that the lawyers, based on that, looking at the use of the word grossly negligent, looking at the way that's been defined, looking at the statute where it occurs, both realized that that was probably not what he wanted to say, and ultimately he made the decision to change that wording and convey what it was he did want to say, and that all of those discussions were generated based on a legal discussion of the use of that term as a legal definition, not as a indicia of violation of any particular statute at all.